So what I did was someone called me up for a VP of Eng interview, and I thought that this might be a good opportunity. So I went for that interview, and in the interview I told them that I am not here for a job. This is what I'm building. So I took wireframes with me, and do you think that this can be useful for you? And they said, okay, if you build this in 15 days, let's have a look and we'll see then.
Thanks so much for doing this. I'm excited to learn more about you, Middleware, and your journey so far.
Thank you, Adi, for having me. It's a privilege and honor to be speaking with you.
So tell us about Middleware and what is the mission of the company.
So, Middleware, our mission is to become an OS for engineering teams, where we enable a world where the builders are building and the leaders spend more time on strategic and technical work rather than the world that exists today, where everyone's firefighting, everyone's working, many hours of grinding themselves. But at the end, there are delays. At the end, there are unsatisfied roles. I think to answer this, I would also go a step back, right? When we were engineers in college, and we dreamt of building something that would change the world. So all motivated engineers like us do think the same. They go to a company, and most likely a large company, so that they can do impactful stuff. But as soon as they go into that company, uh, they get stuck with bureaucracies, stuck with processes, and they do more of talking, more of reporting into what they're doing, and less of building. And that's the aim of the company. That's why we started Middleware, to resolve that. As a company and a product company today, we help companies reduce their time to market by reducing their process bottlenecks, leveraging their existing tools like GitHub, Jira, Calendar.
So, in my experience as well as an engineer, engineering manager in different engineering leadership roles, I think that has been the one common theme as well, that builders are always complaining that let us build. They are not getting to build. Can you describe a little bit more about what is the current scenario in terms of engineering culture across the startup ecosystem today, and where does middleware come in?
Yeah. So if you see the building process today in any of the decently sized companies, um, first of all, there's a hierarchy. There's a CTO, director of engineering, then there are managers, a couple of layers of those, and then there are engineers. So ideas percolate downwards with the product heads and everyone. Once there are ideas ready for an engineering team, we call that a sprint. And once the sprint starts, there are, you know, only finite steps. You plan, program, review, deploy, release, deploy and monitor, right? And that's what you do, rinse and repeat. If you see, apart from just the coding aspect, every step is sort of a collaborative activity. And because it is a collaboration, you need to align more people, you need to time it, and that's where bottlenecks get built up. Most of the engineering teams today, if you see, have been raised in a decade with a lot of funding, right? So because of the money flowing in, a lot of teams have grown rapidly. It wasn't a very organic growth, and hence there was no time to set up the right processes, and hence there's some turmoil, which leads to bottlenecks, which leads to delay, and which leads you to reach later to your goals.
Speaking about middleware, so what sort of customers are appropriate for middleware? Who should go and say that, okay, this is something I need?
So we are lucky to be operating in a space where we are industry agnostic and size agnostic. However, we are best suited when the companies have a middle layer. That's when they should have middleware. By that, what I mean is when you have an engineering director or a CTO and you have engineering managers and then you have an engineer, that's where the visibility problems start propping up. And if you see any smaller startup, they are always short of people or resources or money or time, right? And sometimes all of them. But as you grow slightly larger, when you are 50-ish in size, then you do have people because you hired them with capacity. What you are, what you don't have is the smooth delivery process, and that's where middleware comes in very handy. We become your co-pilots when you are the agent of change. When you're transforming your team, into working as a smooth machinery of deploying something.
Let's take a step back. I would love to learn a little bit more about you. Tell us about your beginnings. Tell us about your childhood. Did you have any formative experiences that helped shape who you are today?
Of course, of course. Um, so, I mean, before I dive deep into my journey, there was another podcast uh, where Zakir Khan was saying that this life, everyone is leading into a life of a slumdog millionaire. So everyone's life is slumdog millionaire, where you don't know what impacts your journey, and when you are sitting on the hot seat, that's where you get the answers from. So I got a very fortunate journey. So brought up in a middle class family, didn't have any sort of limitations on what to wear and what to eat. So was fortunate, born into an educated house, but otherwise it was very middle class, so didn't have surplus. Fortunately, my mom is a computer teacher, so got access to computer very early, and started programming when I was 5 years old. So all through my school life, I was the nerdy kid who did not know how to play anything, was a just noob in every goddamn physical activity, but was very good in computers. And in my school days also, I really cherished the all nighters I have pulled before going to school. And then just because of that access to internet very early, access to programming very early, I fell in love with building something, and found my calling of that I am always the happiest when I'm building something. So since then I was always dabbling, sometimes programming, sometimes animation, sometimes security and something else. And then if you remember, back in the day there was Yahoo Messenger, and there were a lot of chat rooms before any of the social media was there. So just because of that, I got the exposure to the world, in terms of what other people are doing. And I participated in some hackathons when I was in class 8 or 9, with people from the world. So that was really cool, and that was really exciting. I once asked my father that, hey, I want to get into Harvard, uh, just because the geography chapter had, mentioned that Harvard is 8,800-acre campus or whatever, and the best university in the world. So I told him that I want to get into Harvard, and he said, just shut up. uh, we can't afford any of it, so you better not think about it. So, and that's when I went back to the status quo of prepping for IIT. Then I went to a college called Delhi College of Engineering. Now it's called Delhi Technological University. I took computer science in it. And yeah, rest of the journey we can share in the questions ahead.
You mentioned you're the happiest when you're building something. Tell us more about the joy of building. Can you share some examples of things that you have built that have brought you this joy?
Yeah, many of those. There are a couple of examples. So let me just chronologically share those. When I was in class 4, we went on a trip to Jaipur, and at that time we bought a digital camera very recently. So everyone who came to our house, we were showing them the photos, and I was put on a duty of clicking the right arrow so that we can cover all the photos. And I really didn't like that job. So what I did was I created a website which had an auto scroll of all the photos that we got. So whenever someone new got into our house and we wanted to show them photos, so we use that website as a gallery for our trips. Um, so that was my first kind of building something for purpose, whether the purpose was very small and short. Then during the college days, and some of the engineers today would relate. There was code chef and all these competitions for data structures. So I noticed one very peculiar thing. Okay, so there was a long contest, and there were contests like 10 days long contest where you were programming and solving mathematical problems. So whenever you solved a problem or the competition was going on in our hostel, everyone was checking, what is my friend's rank, or what is this guy's rank and that guy's rank. They were not concerned about people in the actual rank list, right? So there was a guy called Tourist. Nobody cared about what his rank was. If I am competing with Adi, so I care about what Adi's rank is. And I saw this behavior. So I made a Chrome extension called Stock Coder. Okay. And that could just, in one click tell you what's your local rank list. So you could make a personalized rank list, just like a league. So that was one. And then it got very popular in our hostels because everyone wanted that. The second time we were prepping for interviews, so there was a website called Geeks for Geeks in our college. So because everyone was prepping and the website was very crap, I had a very, I had a Core i3 laptop which used to crash very, very often. So I opened like 7, 8 tabs to prep, and the laptop crashed. I did that again, and now I had lost all my progress. And I thought that this is not cool. So overnight, I built another Chrome extension called Geekometer, which lets you open any question, mark it as done, or mark or color code it to your difficulty levels or to your revision lists. And then anytime you saw the website was formatted for you. The website had those questions checked off wherever you see them and color coded for you. The cool thing, however, now in stock code, I could not do a lot of traction. So this time in interviews, I knew that people will cheat. Okay, so people will, when they cheat for a question, this question will appear on Geeks for Geeks, and that's where I can get visibility for my extension. So I went 2 hours prior to the interview to our computer center where the interviews are held, and in that computer center, I installed the extension in 250 computers. So whenever anyone cheated in that exam, which people would, they would see the extension, and then that curiosity would go back to their hostel rooms, and that's how we went up to like 2,500 weekly active users across India. So yeah, those are some initial examples, and now of course I'm building middleware.
So the journey leading up to middleware, can you tell us about before middleware? What were some of your other roles?
Yeah. So as I was mentioning in my journey that I joined, Delhi College of Engineering, and I had always thought of starting up, but I didn't know how. So I thought that till the time I'm not starting up anything, I'll just work with founders. So I did a lot of internships with the with like almost all sizes of the companies. So I started with a company uh, who did not have a, you know the team's name, and there was just one guy trying to gather people from hackathons and building something. Then I went to Hacker Earth. I worked for Mozilla. I worked for Avast, and then I joined a company called Kayako as a full-time engineer in 2016. Um, it was uh, it was a choice that I made because I wanted to stay closer to the startup ecosystem and not go into larger companies like my friends did. Um, so in Kayako, I had a great time because it wasn't a typical, just a software engineer role. So they gave me a team to just transform and revamp, and I was just a fresher, right? So dealing with 30-year-olds who are running a poor system to reform into an automated system. And then in Kako, I worked in different departments like growth, sales, call, shadowing, and stuff. So I learned a lot there. Then Kako got acquired, and that was my funda that if I'm not doing a startup, then let me just stick with the company I'm working for. After that, I moved to a company called Shuttle, and in Shuttle again, I joined as an engineer. And then as the company was growing, so we were doing 20,000 rides when I joined. And company started growing, but the system was not scaling up. So I was fortunate to be a part of that scale up team. So I became a manager the next year. Started with a team of 3. So I became a manager when I was 24, and my boss was very senior, right? So everyone used to listen to him, but nobody would listen to me because I'm 24. I was just a peer to them last day. And now, for the 30, 32-year-olds, uh, a kid is asking them to do things. And I realized very quickly that this is not going to work. So this method of managing, I call that managing by command, will not work for me because my boss was 6 feet tall, broad guy, had a very heavy voice, and I didn't have any. So any of that. So I realized very quickly that I have to learn the art of managing, and I can't do it innately. So that became that was a seed of curiosity for me, and um, I started reading a lot. I started talking to more managers, understanding, how they run teams. And fortunately, my team started growing. So from 3, we became 13. I set up a Bangalore office for Shuttle in Embassy Golf Links. And then COVID hit, right? So now nobody knew how to operate in this new setup, right? So we were sort of used to doing like Delhi and Bangalore kind of work ethic, but that gave a really good opportunity because when there was a lot of chaos, I was too excited to set up a lot of processes, and that's where I did a lot of experiments because Shuttle grew rapidly. Before COVID hit us, we were doing 100,000 rides a day, so we had scaled a 5x through that journey uh, as a business, and we were like growing massively. But of course, COVID happened, unfortunately, but we still had a lot of plans, a lot of things to do. We did a couple of things later on as well in Bangkok and Manila. So once lockdown was there and there was a lot of chaos, I got very excited to try out processes. And that's where sort of I think this idea uh, was born for middleware of how do you achieve immense like excellence as a team. So nobody in my team resigned during that period. I took a KPI for myself to reduce the meeting hours. So everyone was going bonkers with meetings, and I took a personal goal that I will not let any of my team member have more than 10 hours of meeting in a week. And for everything that they're going to meeting for, I'll just install a new process, make it more smooth, make it more smooth. And my peers, managers were still slogging. So that was a sign of validation. And of course, so later we implemented those methods to improve the whole team. But yeah, so those were the days where um, we achieved a smooth process, on time deliveries, very high quality software, and no attrition, right? In the time of COVID. So that's when I understood that okay, this is one way to lead a team of this size in a B2C market. And soon enough, Shuttle got acquired in 2021. So I moved to a company called Maersk, is the largest shipping company in the world, to Copenhagen, and that's when I became a senior engineering manager. But the bug for building something was still there, and one good thing happened that when I moved to Copenhagen, till this point I was only in India, and I expected chaos in some way. Okay, so I thought that India is a chaotic country, and maybe it's just the way we operate on things. But Europe is a very calm, very like robust, process-driven country. But when I went there, I saw the same challenges in engineering teams. In fact, when I spoke to other startups as well, they were dealing with the same issue. They were hiring rapidly, but the output was not even linear. And that excited me that, okay, is this a widespread problem? And should we solve it? So while I was there, I started, reaching out to people. So I did 50 long form interviews with engineering leaders across the globe to understand what their challenges are, saw a common pattern, and that's where, middleware was born. So came back to India in March 22 to start middleware.
So, talking specifically about the leap from various engineering manager, engineering leadership roles into starting your own startup, what was your friends and family's reaction?
Hmm. Very interesting. So at first it was a no. Uh, then there was a lot of crying and uh, uh, persuasion from my end that basically I was so adamant to do it this time because all my life I was just talking that I'll start something, I'll do a startup one day, I'll do a startup one day. That when I was, just adamantly pushing towards it and came back to India and my parents were just shocked. There was a moment when my dad said that, okay, tu kar le. uh, because if you don't do it, uh, y- you will keep cribbing. So just for the sake of not cribbing, you do it. Um, and so I got a buy-in from him. My mom and my grandmother, there was no buy-in from them for a lot of time. And maybe until last year also they were saying that, you know, अच्छी बड़ी नौकरी थी, क्यों छोड़ के कर रहे हो? It was a good enough outcome, good salary, you were minting good money, had a great life. You've also gotten fatter now. So why don't you go back? You still get it. Why are you struggling through this? So, after they saw some results, after they saw me happier, I think I was happier back then also, but now, after they saw some results, they saw things moving and they saw the passion. Now everyone is very, very supportive. Um, in the family side, friends I think were supportive from day one. Friends in general are supportive. Family is the one worried. So and couple of my friends also became angels in the company. Yeah, so that was their first angel investment.
So tell us about the beginnings of middleware and what's the team setup like right now?
So I came back to India in March 22, and I used to have this friend called Jayant, who's my co-founder now. Back in our shuttle days, I was always telling everyone that I'll start up one day, and he used to tell me that whenever you do, just give me a call. And that's what I did. The moment I landed in India, I called him up that, hey, this is the idea, and I want you to work with me. And at that time, he was with Uber. He was a tech lead at Uber, and he said that okay, sounds good. And then he started, contributing a little bit, but he was still on the fence before we actually got into the system. So initially, we also did not know how to raise funds, whom do we raise it from, and all that journey. So initially, it was just me and Jayant dabbling around with making something. Uh, I had heard in the best practices that you don't have to build before you sell and stuff. So what I did was someone called me up for a VP of Eng interview, and I thought that this might be a good opportunity. So I went for that interview, and in the interview, I told them that I am not here for a job. This is what I'm building. So I took wireframes with me, and do you think that this can be useful for you? And they said, okay, if you build this in 15 days, let's have a look, and we'll see then. I'm like, okay, cool. So that's when I came back. I asked Jen that, okay, let's do these wireframes. And that's how we got our first customer. Uh, of course, there were many more iterations after that. And in October, actually, we had some interns working in the middle. But in October, we did our first hire, on October 10th specifically. And yeah, so we raised our round also in October. Uh, Back then, our angel round closed in October. Then our first hire also happened in October because of the middle class upbringing. We were too afraid to spend money because it was all our money, whatever little savings we had. And then the ball started rolling. We made our first revenue in December. So December 26th is the date I remember very fondly because that was the first uh, dollar we made. And Stripe notification came and it was all joyous. Uh, Back then, Jayant was in Hyderabad. Uh, and then Jayant moved to Gurgaon last year, where we finally decided to set up our office before that because we did not have a team. So I could work from anywhere. Um I could work from Jayant's home in Hyderabad. I could work from Bangalore, where the meetings of investors were happening. So yeah, that's how we started.
So I want to go back to something that you said earlier, which is being a manager when you're managing people that are much older than you. And this is something that I've noticed in a lot of people that I know, a lot of high performers with steep trajectories, that they find themselves in this position where they have to lead a team that is maybe a lot more experienced than them. So, do you have any advice for someone who's in a similar situation right now, having to manage or lead a team of people that are much more experienced than?
Of course, of course. I think that's a blessing in disguise because that's how you learn to lead the teams properly. A lot of people, and it depends on culture to culture, but a lot of people see management as an authority, where people would bow down to you or would follow what you say. But it's typically not that way, and especially in this era, so certainly not. Uh, People are working at a company to become successful. So it's very important to understand what their definition of success is. And as a manager, you are responsible for making them successful. Also, the company has appointed you as a manager or a leader. So you also have to make the company successful. So your job is to align both of their interests in a similar direction so that both the parties are happy. And so it is always, some people call it that format of leading as servant leadership, where you are enabling them always. So that's my idea of leadership as well, because we discussed that. Command leadership did not work well for me. So I think it's best to make them successful, make that relationship stronger. There are a couple of tips that people can do. So once I bumped into Vineet Nair, who was ex CEO of I think TCS or HCL, and I was fortunately sitting with him, and I told him that I recently became a manager. What advice do you have for me? And he shared one advice that whenever you have someone reporting into you, ask them the top 3 things that make their work life important, right? So most of the people would think that it is title, it is raise, but once you start asking people what are the 3 things, often they don't say money. Now that can be a reason apart from that, but apart from money, there are a lot of things that people are looking for. And as a manager, you have to take care for those top 3 things for that person. So you have to understand what their success is. But in return, you have to make a pact. So if you come to me with a problem, I will never answer. So you always come to me with a problem and a solution, and then we'll collaborate. So that is one advice that I've followed thoroughly through my journey, and that has resulted in great relationships still with my team, even after many years after departing. Yeah.
Let's get back to developer productivity. And I think that is definitely one heated topic. It means different things to different people, and there's always a lot of debate about it. What does developer productivity mean to you?
That's a very good question. For me, productivity means if I'm able to achieve what I aim for, then I'm productive. So if you wanted to just go on a jog today morning and you went for a jog, then you're productive. So for me, productivity is a lot more to do with commitment versus done. So if you can achieve what you commit, then you're productive. Is what my definition is. What developer productivity essentially means is the developer able to achieve what they want to do in the day, in, in the week, in the sprint, in that quarter. And when you're looking at developer productivity as an organization, you're just not looking for one developer. You're looking for your entire team. Because if you start looking at one developer, and that's where most of the companies go wrong, people think of productivity as producing more because it's in the word. I try to say that as an efficiency. Basically, I try to put efficiency instead of productivity when it comes to developer, just because the developer output is not directly correlated to business outcome. So for business, what you want is more revenue, more satisfied customers, right? More new customers or more revenue from existing customers. So none of that matters if the developer writes 100 more lines a day. So why do you need to measure their output? What you need to measure in flip side is if they want to do something, are they getting stuck or blocked anywhere? Are they waiting more? So if you remove those times, then your developers will definitely be able to achieve what they want to do. And as a coach, as a manager, you have to help them increase their capacity, increase their efficiency. And that's what I look at. So just to summarize, developer productivity is the state, or is a state, I would say, when the developer who wants to achieve something can achieve it without getting blocked. It's all smooth. When ideas get converted to products in an engineering team is what productivity is for me.
Can you tell us a bit about the concept of DORA metrics? And are there any other metrics that organizations should track when they are interested in improving developer productivity?
Yeah. Good question. So DORA Metrics is one of the popular frameworks for measuring developer productivity. Uh, there are a couple of nuances here, and there are more frameworks as well, which we'll talk about. So DORA Metrics was developed by Google. It focuses and it is the best framework when you want to do delivery optimization, when you want to improve your team's software delivery. So the fundamental, and I'm going to go like fundamental first, and then what the metric system is. Uh, it aims for one team to get better at getting better. So it is best suited when you are applying it to a delivery team, the product teams, infra team, whatever team, and you measure the DORA metrics for that team only. You don't stack rank them. You don't do anything. You just keep measuring and improving that team. Now, DORA suggests four key metrics. The two metrics are for speed and two metrics are for quality. So it induces a balance of speed and quality. The four metrics are a lead time to change, which means once you decide that you want to build something, how soon can you take that to production? Which involves your the time when you start your first commit till the time it's in production. So first commit, PR open, PR reviews, close, and deployment. The second metric is deployment frequency, which means that how frequently can your team deploy the software to the customer, which would typically mean that if your team is in different bands, for example, if you're releasing one software in 6 months or one deployment in 6 months, and if there is any error, you are unable to fix that error until 6 months. However, if you go for multiple deployments a day, then that just means that you can deploy on demand. That whenever a customer is having a problem, then you can quickly resolve it. On the flip side, you can also trust this for high iteration speed. Because if you see, engineering can influence a lot of ideas, but it doesn't control or doesn't bring in a lot of ideas for the business. So engineering actually owns the iteration speed. And if you iterate faster, for sure you can take more ideas to the market faster. Right. So those are the first two metrics. Then the second two metrics are change failure rate. Out of the times that you deploy, how many times do you fail? Now, why does it matter? Because that shows your quality metrics, your quality processes. Is your team, uh, able to catch some problems early? And it's okay. It's a journey. So they introduce a fourth metric, which is called mean time to recovery or mean time to resolution. Uh, which means that okay, out of 100 times that you failed, you had like X failures. In those X failures, how soon can you recover the system? So even if you have a bad quality mandate, is your system recovery fast? And these are the four metrics. And I have seen in my journey a lot of different companies focus on, you know, either of the side. Some companies I've seen having great speed but poor quality. So they focus on the quality metrics first and vice versa.
Let's talk about the middleware product. Can you tell us more about how does the middleware product work exactly? Like what do you need to set it up and what sort of insights can engineering leaders get from it?
So philosophically and tactically as well, we sit on top of all your existing tools. So the idea is middleware today wants to become one-stop shop for the engineering leaders. So we connect from your ideation phase till your delivery phase from all the tools that you have, which involves your Jira, Google Calendar, GitHub, and of course there are alternatives like GitLab, Bitbucket, PagerDuty, and any tool that you can imagine. So we connect and sit on top of all that, so that you can see from end to end how's your work flowing, right? Is the flow getting blocked somewhere? Does your team need your attention in some areas so that you can attack those particular areas? How we aim to cater to the leaders as a product is that now instead of going from one meeting to another, instead of firefighting all the time, they can just come to middleware, understand where their team needs their attention, and attack that area of problem. The second thing that we do is So one, we save their time in creating reports or going to meetings. The second problem that we solve is driving change. So a lot of products give out metrics. Sometimes the metrics are also built in house. So people think that making metrics is quite easy. So why should I buy a tool for it? But that is true. But driving change in an organization is very tough. Changing behaviors, driving change, giving that motivation, and as we spoke in our podcast, uh, that people today won't accept commands. So even if you're a leader and you have certain metrics, uh, your managers won't improve them because they do not have a buy-in, or your developers will certainly not be motivated to change them. So driving change is tough, and that's what we solve much better than any other tool in the market, right? Period. So what we do is, one, we give the idea of flow to the leaders where the retention is required. And when, so this we call signal. So DORA Metrics is a signal framework. So one of the frameworks which gives you signal. But now when you need to improve it, so middleware gives you a suite of how to take actions to improve your metrics. We do not talk about numbers in that. We talk about, for example, if your PR process is taking longer, why would that be? So we tell you, okay, there is a reviewer bottleneck in your team, and because of which there is a certain delay, let's say on an average 3-day wait time delay for your team, which is half a week, right? So why don't you get these other contributors in the code base to also review, who have contributed almost as much as this main reviewer? Why don't you start spawning them as a reviewer? Look at your PR review time go down, because with PR review time is once the developer is ready with their changes and the review is taking longer, which is certainly wait time, block time, or wasted time. So there is no problem, no harm if the PR time goes down, especially like keeping the quality bar the same. And that's how the managers today or the engineering teams themselves are able to self-organize them, reduce that, and then move the needle for the main metric. So that's how we operate. And I can give you one example of how one can 150 member engineering team can use it, right? Let's say you are the CTO of a 50 member engineering team, and you are struggling with delays all the, like, in all the quarters, that whatever you plan, um, though you have the staffing, but there are delays in your delivery, and now you want to solve it. So one way is to get a team to create a lot of Excel sheets for you, and then you indulge yourself in that. You firefight all the time and lose all the strategic meetings that you have, or lose all the technical meetings that you would have done. Or you could do just a login on middleware, see which particular teams are struggling with the spillages, um, because remembering your problem was delay. So see which teams are struggling with spillages over time. Now sit with the manager or ask the manager to reduce the spillage, and keep double clicking until you find the cause and actionable, all through middleware. This whole activity would find you the cause in minutes, what would have taken you hours or days at least. And now you can try different actions, because there's no one size fits all. You can try different actions with the managers, with the engineers, and have a feedback loop via middleware on what works. And then you can blast implement it for all the teams that are having the same issues.
I'm thinking about the process of adopting a tool such as middleware, or even an organization or a tech team focusing or starting to focus on DORA metrics. Let's say there is like a middle manager or like a CTO or even a developer who's just very excited about adopting something like this, which is focusing more on the DORA metrics, having a tool such as middleware. How do you convince the other team members? How do you convince the business team members? How do you get buy-in within your team that this is a good idea?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So there are two types of challenges usually when we are trying to implement a tool like middleware. One is, not everyone is data driven, right? It's a journey. It's still a new paradigm, because engineering teams were not used to working with metrics. It's only the other departments like sales, marketing, and everyone else kind of working with metrics. So the second buy-in that you told me, that how do you convince business, is easier today in this weather, because earlier CTOs were not questioned for anything. Now CTOs are questioned for everything when it comes down to money matters and budget utilization. So the business teams are already asking CTOs for metrics. So the boardrooms and like all the discussions where other stakeholders are on the call, everyone is presenting numbers except engineering team. So the buy-in is already there. So you have to do it in some ways. I think the tougher job is to drive a change in behavior for management and how they utilize uh, data in their actions. For that, the key thing is choosing the right metrics. And for that, the most successful implementations that I've seen have a leader who's very clear on what they want to do in the next few months, years. What is the end state? Is they are very clear. And hence that clarity lets them choose the right metrics. For example, if you want to scale up your team from 200 to 400, so for sure you need a certain way of how a team is run. So if you want to make a playbook and today your team is struggling with speed, then you would solve for processes with speed and make that in the playbook. Then soon they'll have quality problems and then you'll solve for that. So essentially, if the leader knows that I have to scale up and I have to bring my team to this certain level of delivery, then it becomes very easy because the leader drives the change, educates the team, gives them the metric. The problems occur when the leader themselves are not clear on what they want to do, and when they are just looking for a metric. That's when it becomes difficult because they are trying to seek answers from a metric framework, which I think is not the right way. Metrics are just guiding lights, but you have to seek the direction. So metrics are everywhere. So you will get overwhelmed with a lot of metrics, and that's an anti-pattern, as we see in many products. So explicitly in middleware, we manage to keep those isolated paths. So if you're on a certain path, we do not show you any other metric. So we try to be concentrated on the signals in that region. So that's what we do. Anytime we have a leader who's just looking for metrics, we try to understand what their goals are and then choose the right metric system for them and then implement it. Because once you have the leader, whether it is an engineering manager, whether it is a senior engineering manager, a director, or a CTO, it's very important to understand what the leader is trying to achieve, then suggest them the right set of metrics, whether by our content or by like just a conversation. And that's when they start using middleware, drive that change, get the buy-in from other team members.
I'm thinking about in terms of performance reviews or appraisals. As you mentioned, that other teams are very, very reliant on these kind of numbers and metrics, be it something like sales, marketing, IT, operations, and so on.
Yeah.
Should metrics such as what a middleware provides or the DORA metrics, should they play a role in the, let's say, appraisal process, performance review process or not?
I don't think so, because again, commitment for me is again, uh, committed versus done, and not any metric. So of course, that if that becomes a metric on what you wanted to achieve and how much you have done, uh, I think when you're doing appraisals for engineers, there are much more things in that person's journey, which is apart from delivery as well. So let's cover those, right? So for delivery, I think there should be clear goals on what is expected out of them. Are they performing as expected, under or over, uh, in terms of quality, in terms of how much they are able to take up? Are they even performing at the peak performance or not? Should be a criteria, not what kind of metrics did you impact, because metrics are guiding lights, they are not the end end game. uh, then the other things are how are you operating with your colleagues, do you have leadership qualities, are you able to mentor people? So all those things should come in appraisals. I think metrics particularly should not come in appraisals, and there's a reason to it. And we all have heard about the Goodhart's law, that if you make a metric a measure, it ceases to become a metric. So then people will start gaming it, and you lose that direction of the team where you want them to go. So hence I counterintuitively say that it should not be used in the appraisal process.
I'm thinking about the agile methodologies, how tech companies nearly universally today operate on the regular sprint cycles, tools such as Jira and so on. What are your thoughts on this? Is it a necessary evil or is there another way?
Method to the madness. If there is no way to operate on things, then they lose track. Hence, things like Agile, DORA, which are the first great steps, take place in the like take place in the org's journey. Uh, Now, I do think Agile is one method, and Jira is one of the tools uh, for Agile implementation. The way we are for DORA, it is a necessary evil, yes, but you don't have to follow it by the book. Uh, I I call that as like bespoke processes. So every team has a different context. You cannot follow Agile blindly. You cannot do everything by the book because your team sizes are different, your industry is different, your challenges as a business is different, your goals might be different. So you always have to take that direction, but you have to put the tactics as per your context, as per your requirements today. So Jira, yes, it gives a way to track activities on what is going on, and brings people on the same page. So yes, I really like it. I won't comment on the tool itself, but yeah, certainly as a methodology, there are different like Kanban and stuff. But Agile is something I would recommend because it gives people two things. One, a consensus on what needs to be done. So you plan the sprint and you keep that. Then it gives an opportunity to revisit it by retrospectives. I found retrospective as the best tool in my life, personally and professionally both. Uh, Especially in teams, when you do retrospectives, it's a blameless culture. It promotes blameless culture, and as a team, you can drive a lot of improvements. So I think just for that, I really want, like, if you're not, if as a team you're not following anything, you should just start following sprint and the agile methodologies. But of course, make it bespoke to your context.
Right. What's the 10-year vision for middleware?
To become the OS of engineering teams, the way we talk about Jira today, uh, I think that's our goal. Atlassian is one company that I really like. Of course, we integrate with Jira. We are also on the marketplace. But we want to become the OS for every engineering team possible, and not just a player. We want to be the leader in that. Where if you are running an engineering team, it's impossible to run it without middleware.
So, the journey of a founder, it has a lot of ups and downs, and running a startup is always a roller coaster. But another thing I've noticed about this journey of a founder is that it takes you to the edges of a domain. It takes you to the edges of where the knowledge that is existing in the industry, maybe that isn't enough anymore. You have gone deeper in the domain of, I would say, developer productivity than most have. What are some things that you would say that you know now about this journey or developer productivity that you didn't before you started middleware?
Very good question. I would answer the founder question first. So I think, coming from a product background, and very like when the engineering is deep ingrained, you're always solving problems. You don't understand about how to sell it and how will this scale as a business. So in very short answer, I would say I would build distribution before than product, which I learned the hard way on our journey. And that's one thing that I would change. And that's one thing that I know now that I did not know before. Um, I would say, like, I would advise people to be more cash rich in a journey than not. There are many school of thoughts. There are many good playbooks, but usually nothing works. So again, this journey also needs to be very bespoke to your context. But I can always advise people, and I still do, to raise more build distribution before you make or you invest too much in the product. And the second question about developer productivity. Um, I think with developer productivity, it's still evolving. When I started up, there was only like DORA Metrics and Space framework was also getting up. Then I also discovered a couple of more frameworks like Flow framework and how people do value stream mapping. So how people do value stream mapping. Uh, so the space is also evolving to find answers, to find the right way to run the show. So I would say we are still evolving with the space itself, not the space framework, but the developer productivity space. And one thing that I started the thought with, I thought that if we start with a novel way of doing something, people will quickly take it up. But in my journey, I realized that driving change is one of the most difficult things in an organization. Um, a lot of times, I also see that even if the participants of the same thing, uh, for example, if you want to make your team productive and you are running a 5,000 member engineering team, so if you go to the directors below, they do not want to expose their metrics because their life's working well with a black box where they present it. And that's something that I learned very later in my life on how to navigate things.
So, starting up in the developer tool space, let's say for a founder who is either ideating or recently started something in the developer tool space, do you have any advice or what kind of playbook should such a founder follow?
Again, I mean, do not follow a playbook. Try to build the top of the funnel first and just focus on that. One common mistake that we did was to, you know, when you're doing a first startup and you're just starting up, kind of the confidence is always on a downward curve. So what you want is any immediate success, and then you start selling it to individual companies. But let's say when you sell to 10 companies, you have already hustled through, but the 11th one is equally hard, and your pitch statement is not as sharp. You do not know where the next customer would come, and it's always a hustle. So the better way, in my opinion, um, if your ticket sizes are not super huge, is to try to understand, even if you want to do a sales driven motion, is to try to understand very neatly how the top of the funnel will be built. How will you keep getting more and more customers, and then solve for conversion at every step. So once you start doing it, not only your GTM will start shaping up, but also your pitch statement, your focus, the way you design the product will also change.
So, Middleware recently underwent a change to the open source model. Tell us about what prompted this switch.
Yeah. Um. So I'll cover the longer part of the story, right? Uh. So if you see engineering leadership, most of the managers are just promoted overnight from engineers to manager, and they are expected to perform flawlessly from day one. Now they do not know what to do the next day because nobody taught them. Nobody taught them how to manage people, how to manage projects, how to manage process. Uh, so they have nowhere to learn it from. They have nowhere to ask it from because the power dynamics are so high in an organization. They can't appear weak. Uh, so there's no way they can't. There's no shortcut. So they have to learn everything by doing mistakes, right? In that interim, their manager is frustrated because no visibility and only delays. Their reportees are frustrated because micromanager and we are burnt out. And they are frustrated themselves because they were very successful as an engineer and now they are struggling as a manager. So what we saw was three key problems: education, tooling, and access to the community. Uh, so education is what we are solving via content, tooling what we did with middleware, and third is access to the community. So now the third pillar was very important, and that's why we decided to take the community route. But we still could have done meetups that we are doing now and kept it closed source. But what closed source does is that we are still accessing a lot of confidential data, right? Although we do not touch code, but there is a confidentiality, and companies are worried about it, which prevents a lot of managers because of lack of permissions or a very long process to try out any of the products. And that's when we decided to, why don't we open our core of the product, give the first step, because DORA, as we spoke, right, is the first great step when you're trying to move towards engineering productivity. We wanted to make that first step easier for the people. We wanted to understand, we wanted them to understand their signals better so that we can help them take actions. And hence, we decided to open source the core of our product. And the first offering there was the DORA Metrics. And now we are trying to build a community around it so that today, if today, if an engineer becomes a manager, they have the first tooling present to them. They have the first community present to them for free.
Can you share a few more examples of pros and cons of the FOSS model versus, let's say, like a regular B2B SaaS model?
Yeah, so we'll go with pros and cons for this. So one, a lot of inhibition goes away for enterprises to try our product. They are free to try it out locally. Then the trust goes high because they know that you're not at least snooping away their data in the source code. Cons are that you have to open source your code. The developers in your team, even if they were not writing as beautiful of a code, now they have to do it all. Uh, Pros on the other side is that you get a lot of feedback from like the larger community. They don't have to be your customers. They can come, give feedback. Sometimes they also contribute. So you also get a lot of contributors to your code base. That's the pro. But on the flip side, there's a lot of maintenance headache as well. You have to be more responsible than you are in closed source. So these are the top, pros and cons. Uh, the third thing that worked in our favor is that people now could do a POC themselves than involving us. So now they try our product, they like it, they already compare it with our closed source operators, our closed source competitors, and then they come to us. So the intent is already there, and we just have to fulfill and close it. So as a business, our cycles get shorter. Yeah.
How do you think about the total addressable market for the dev tool space or the developer productivity space?
Well, it's always a gray area when you're talking about TAM. Uh, However, I'll give a short answer and a long answer. The If you see the stats for developers in the world, uh, you will find 26 million developers were there last year, and that count is increasing by 10%, 11%. So naturally, we'll have more developers, like 40 million developers in 5 years. So that market is large. Now, what we are targeting in 10 years is to become the operating system of that market, which means that we are targeting developer productivity by the management value side. The management side, we are targeting tooling, which is a CI/CD. Uh, and even if we just focus on these two things in 10 years and become better at it, then we have already tapped a large market. So there was a study by Stripe that today 30% of the productivity is lost due to inefficiencies in the software teams. Now, if you take 30% of an engineer's salary and multiply that with 30 million developers, it's already a huge number, right? So depending on what region, but typically this market size is what I saw in like some of the reports. So this is today, as of today, the market size is 25 billion for developer productivity and developer tooling itself.
So there's a lot to build. Tell us about the tech that powers middleware.
So we are a web app. So that means that we have a front end and a back end. And we are divided into three layers. So we once the client side then is a we call it BFF, a backend for front end, and then there's a analytics sorry, then there's the analytics server. We are based on AWS today, and everything is on AWS. We use TypeScript for front end, React and TypeScript, and we use Python for the backend. We use a So now we are moving things, so we'll move to Fast API. But right now we were leveraging AWS's a framework called Chalice. Okay, so what AWS has done that since make I took this shortcut. Okay, so making the whole infrastructure on day one was very tough because I was the only one programming. So what I did was I used a framework called Chalice, which lets you program like Flask app. But if you write Chalice deploy, it can make all the API gateway connections for you with Lambda. It can add listeners from S3. It can add listeners from SQS. So you can probably do all things in infrastructure without writing a single infrastructure code or having a DevOps engineer. So that's what we do. So that's pretty much it. So we have RDS, we have Redis, we have front end React servers.
Any memorable customer journeys that you remember fondly?
Many. So I think the first one to start off with is I went to CyberHub to a customer. I won't reveal the name, but I went to their office and we were, very amped up. Had demoed it to them. They were liking it, and I went to their office to onboard them. Right, and I was very excited. I went in a suit and stuff. So the moment their team started login, and everyone started complaining, and I was surprised at what happened because the last time I checked, it was all work. Incidentally, I did not check the morning. I was just checking in the night, and my co-founder had committed something in the night. So the logins failed, and that was the day to onboard our first customer. And at that time, I just borrowed, a chair from their office and asked them that can you just please give me 10 minutes? Because I was very afraid that the customer would run or just throw me out of their office. So I asked them for 10 minutes and removed my blazer and started debugging and was on a call with my co-founder. So we debugged the system, got it up in those 10 minutes, and then onboarded that company. And that became our first check.
How's your work-life balance?
Uh, I think, in my personal opinion, I do not even seek balance. I do not think anything great can be developed with a balance. For me, it's sinusoidal. Right now, my sine wave with the startup journey has been up. I do take a couple of breaks, and thanks to my wife, who forced me to take some breaks. But I really like working. I really like what I'm doing, and hence, for me, the need of a break is just sleep. But otherwise, I mean, I do need to improve a bit on that. But for me, nothing great gets built if you are trying to balance a lot of things. So it's just about prioritizing, going extreme in one direction, and when you want a break, then you go the other way, and then get your way back.
With the entry of Gen AI, LLMs, and tools such as, let's say, the GitHub Copilot, we have a lot of the industry again having another look at developer productivity. There's a lot of hype out there, and there are some real improvements out there as well.
Correct.
So what is your view of what impact does Gen AI have or will have on developer productivity?
It's fantastic. I'm sure you have also tried, getting some code generated, getting some answers generated. I think Gen AI, not just OpenAI, other models as well, are very fantastic. And the infrastructure that has been built, like Langflow, Llama Index, uh, that is great. So it certainly has impact on productivity. My personal opinion on any technological shift is that it certainly changes the hierarchies. It certainly changes the org structures. But I don't think it will eat jobs. It'll certainly make the current skill set slightly, uh, you know, less exciting because you can do much more. So people will be able to build more complex things given the same time and the same company. So companies would be making more complex projects and would be making more. So on a larger, like 10,000 feet view, it it would be almost the same, but we would be doing like much more and much detail oriented work. So I'm excited for Gen AI.
Are there any examples that you can think of? For example, a few instances where I have seen it have a real impact is one example is converting designs to code. For example, going from like a Figma to React. Another would be maybe automatic generation of unit tests or something like that. Are there any notable use cases that you think?
Yeah. So for example, we do a lot of integrations, and for us, it used to be a long, like a week before we can come up with a good integration working. So for us, there's a clear head start. We give the documentation link to GPT, or let's say Gemini, and they give us a structure which is, probably 80%, 70% working. So we have a head start of, many days of work, and now the developers can integrate that into the code, so we don't compromise any confidentiality of our business logic or anything. We just convert any integration to our conditions. Uh, so that is one area where our developers use it very, very often. I think for my own self, I use it for a lot of documentation, sometimes social media posts, blog posts, like getting it grammatically checked and stuff. Um, there are some limitations in like in the final version. I still like to give it my own taste because of authenticity and the way I speak. But I've seen tremendous communication uh, bar raise in the company itself with people using Gen AI so effectively.
Do you have an opinion on tools such as the GitHub Copilot, where does it really add any more value or is it just a slightly better autocomplete?
I think it certainly adds value. There's no doubt about it. Depends on what you want to do. If it's just the boilerplate, it takes it away. For us as a company's mission as well, right? So we want to remove all the BS, all the frictional points from a building experience, and that's what Copilot does. So it's very much aligned to what our mission is. So I'm super happy and super excited to what Copilot does. I've seen it add value directly to the engineering teams. Uh, Although because it's so easy, there's a tendency to generate more, for which then the reviewer reviewing becomes a problem. Then there are AI agents to review code also. So I think we'll find balance, but Copilot certainly adds immense value.
I'm thinking of for, let's say, a young student or a early career professional thinking about their long term career in tech. I have a bit of a contrarian opinion here, which is I think that software, even now, and for the, let's say, the last 30 years or so, has been in a bit of a bubble. And software engineers are in a position of privilege where they are paid much more than, let's
Yeah.
say, some other industries. So my contrarian opinion is that those margins will come down. My contrarian opinion is that software engineers will eventually be like all the other different types of engineers, whether that's mechanical engineers, and that there has to be some sort of normalization coming into this industry. So, what's your opinion on what should a developer, let's say a late stage college, early career professional, how should they think about their future in career in tech?
Yeah, very good question. I think I'm on your side, on the contrarian opinion about equalization of skill sets, because if the skill set becomes commoditized, it has to be you know equalitized, and whatever the word is. So it has to be brought down in a similar fashion. You have to be fair with everyone, because now there's no like special value that you are bringing to the table. So my advice for anyone starting out in tech would be to also see, like, where can you get the special knowledge. For example, if you're starting in tech but you start in biotech, now that information, that knowledge, that nuance is very rare. So one has to spend time in understanding it. If all you're bringing today is, okay, I know Python, then there's no special knowledge, right? Anyone can learn it very quickly, or GPT has learned that basic skill. It's the deep skill of a subject of a certain area, where on a vertical you can do an expert study, or like on a vertical you can go very deep. That's where you can benefit, and then software would just become a means. So earlier software was something that we had to write, so it was not a commodity. It required a certain patience to learn programming. Now with GPT, when it does, and now you only need just the patience in debugging, and of course it's becoming dramatically better with every release. So 4.0 is great. uh, so that's my advice, that go very deep in any vertical. Treat technology as a means. uh, However, if you want to be a part of the technology building, for example, what a Python developer was before, then you'll need to focus on what the new technologies are. How can you make the models better, or go mathematically deeper into it? But if you find yourself having more fun in building products, then you should go deeper in certain verticals. It can be a space, it can be uh, biotech, for example, it can be chemical and stuff.
My question is, for an engineer, let's say, who's a part of a early stage startup team, early stage tech team, small team. Now the team is growing. Now the startup is growing. Now you will be bombarded with a lot more processes, a lot more planning, a lot more structure is expected from how you are supposed to work. What kind of mindset should a developer like that have? Because there are a lot of common problems with that and common complaints, like how much time can you really expect someone to spend on things like Jira and so on.
Right.
And so what kind of mindset should they approach such a change with?
Oh, yeah, wonderful question. I think fortunately I've been in that position where the company was growing, and uh, I was a developer who was handling the chaos. Personally, I love chaotic situations. So the direction has to be more predictable delivery, more smooth operations, like smoother operations. And how you deal with all the bombardment of requests uh, is on what you can commit. Like, take a block. Let's say we'll take different examples. So one example is you're working as a developer alone, and you have to deal with it. So there's lesser heat of processes on you. There's only a process of what you want to comply to, etc. Uh, with that, most developers are not very happy, and I wasn't happy either to update it. But do understand that because the team is growing, there are a lot of new people who do not know you, who do not uh, understand what your work ethic is. So they are operating on zero visibility from you. So it just helps if you can just update what you are working on and what the progress of your work is. So it's not just for you or someone tracking you, it is for everyone else to understand where you are, how can they help you, or how can you help them. So it's very important when the team is growing to understand to, you know, be with the team. So the teamwork is going to be the most important, because if you do not give visibility to someone else won't give the visibility to you. Now the second situation is when you are an engineer in the 0 to 1 journey, but now you are given leadership positions as a tech lead or as an engineering manager in these scenarios, which also happened with me. So the most important thing is to understand what's important for the business, right? The business doesn't care about the process. The business cares about delivery. Business has certain goals. They want things delivered. Now backtrack from that. What is the best way to get that delivery out? That's where processes uh, come in to help the delivery and not to follow the process. So if there is if there's anything that deters your way of working, just throw it out. Just don't just don't abide to it. um, Understand which processes will help you and which processes will just be an overhead. Once you understand it, throw away the overheads, even remove it, and then start adapting the processes which will help you. So let's take an example. Let's say the company is growing, is scaling up now, and there are certain integrations that you need to make live, and you have a team of 10 people or 5 people, whatever, and everyone's working hard. But now you realize that even if my team is working day and night, nothing in your sprint got delivered because of various reasons, like various reasons. So, very important at this point is to start doing retrospective religiously, taking the team together and asking them, okay, what is the problem? It is not just one ticket. It If you start tracking and solving one ticket each, you will be in a mess of firefighting, and you will be lost in the deep ocean of meetings where you are not contributing on a strategic level or technical level. You are just bottlenecked, and you are the person stopping the growth. So bring the team together every 15 days or whatever your sprint cycle is. Ask them what went well and what did not go well, what chew most of your time, how can we improve as a team, and let them come up with answers. You just listen and spot patterns. So usually what will happen is, a typical case is, your team is delivering but the QA is blocked because you have just assigned one manual QA, and the direction is to not have manual QA and have more written tests. But automated tests will also take some time because you are also solidifying the use cases. Automated tests make more sense when you have solidified use cases. When you are yourself iterating, then you don't have those tests, and you have one manual QA block blocking everyone. So that's when you start taking some decisions of, how do I shift left? How do I take this QA out of this process, put them into planning phase so that they can prepare test plan, and the developers are able to solve the our developers are just following the checklist for tests and making a smooth delivery. So now just doing this little change would improve your delivery, improve your completion rates. Now you find the next problem. Let's say the product team is always coming and saying that this is very important for the business, why don't you do this? And your ad hoc is rising. So what we do in middleware, and I'm happy to post some screenshots here and there. So let's say the PM teams come and say that the ad hoc this is important for the business, and you see the ad hoc is rising. At that moment, in an organization, they would assume that you have committed to the planned roadmap, also the task that was spilling, and also the task that came in ad hoc. That's the time when you set the expectations right. That's the time when you say that, okay, every time you come with ad hoc, most of it gets spilled, and most of my plan is also spilled. So let me not plan anything. You only bring ad hoc. And that's when they'll say, oh, no, no, no. We have to achieve that roadmap because business is important, and this is also business. So that's when you push back and say that, okay, first you prioritize what is important for you. What do you want me to do? Because our team will commit only to the things that we do. And that's how you stop the overloading of your team. Once you have stopped it, once you have just put in the work which is abiding to your capacity, that's when you start solving for your estimation adherence and your team's capacity. And that's how process plays a part. So I'll just summarize. As an engineer, you need to just make sure that everyone is aware what you're doing. You need to be helpful to other people. You need to review their PRs so that they review yours. It's a team game. It's not one individual crossing the finish line. You have to be with the team so that others can get unblocked. Welcome your new members wholeheartedly. That will help in the long run. Mentor them. As a growing tech lead or a manager, it's very important to choose the focus. The focus is always what the business wants. uh, get that insight, get that motivation back to your team so that they are also motivated. Constantly do retrospectives at the end of the sprint to understand where are the areas of growth, what processes need to be removed, what processes need to be abided to, and what processes need to be modified to your um, smoother deliveries.
Going off on a bit of a tangent here, I'm thinking how, let's say, a new joinee or a developer who's interviewing around, how should they detect or ask probing questions that will tell them, okay, does this company have a high quality engineering culture or not? Is this a functional setup? Is this a dysfunctional setup? What kind of questions do you think such a developer should ask?
I think ask the leaders, how do you imagine the day of a developer? and that would give you a lot of clarity on how they think the developers spend their time. Um, Developers do not code like the whole day and every day. So there are days when you'll may program for an hour or two and spend rest of the time planning. There might be days where you are in the zone and programming for longer, but on an average, it's for me it's like 4 hours a day I expect a developer to do, and then rest of the day you do planning, testing, interviewing and stuff.
And
Right.
there are instances where those 1 hour days end up driving more of a business needle than.
Correct, absolutely. But it's very important for them to understand how the leaders look at the developer days, so that the alignment is there. The second thing I would say is understand how the leaders look at flow, how the work flows in their organization, uh, how are the decisions being made. The third thing I would actually I'll put more points, but the third thing I would say is talk to a developer and ask them how do they feel about the organization. And fourth is, this is my personal bias, how do they know when they fail? How does the organization understand when they fail? Do they have a metric system for their code like APM? Do they have alerts? What is the kind of culture? Uh, this part is very important to me personally, because if there is no way for them to know when they fail, then the whole organization would be going in a very reactive mode, which would mean a lot of burnout and a lot of madness. I would, depending on the stage of your life, if you want to be the person transforming an organization to this, then join the company who gives you the worst answers, because they would be the most reacting. But if you want a company where you want more or better building experience, then go with a company which is less reactive, more planned, has clear directives on what can enter, what cannot.
What's next for middleware? What can we look forward to in the next 6 to 12 months?
Oh man, very exciting things. As I mentioned, right? So we are trying to become the agents of change. So we are trying to build more nuanced features for all the three levels, for CTO directors, for the managers, and as well as for the developers. We haven't had anything for the developers yet, but as we are collaborating via the open source version with a lot of developers, we have captured very exciting pain points, and that's what we are working towards. Uh, then there are a couple of integrations with GenAI on how we'll answer the questions for CTOs and managers. So very exciting things under the hood. I would love to share once they are out.
So excited to try it out.
Thank you.
Look, thanks so much for doing this. It's always kind of a very educational experience for me personally as well. Like every time we catch up, for me as a technical leader as well. And yeah, thanks so much for doing this, and excited to look forward to the rest of your journey.
Yeah, the pleasure was all mine. Thank you. It's a lovely setup. And
These were incredible questions. So thank you so much for having me.